This Fed Gov Today program is sponsored by Booz Allen. On this edition of Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose, a familiar path ahead for the Coast Guard's digital modernization journey. The evolution of the cloud coming to an agency near you, and the new high risk list looks a lot like the old high risk list. Welcome to Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. The Coast Guard's underway on its digital modernization journey. The Guard's plan may look familiar to people who follow how military services are modernizing. At TechNet Cyber recently, the Coast Guard's Assistant Commandant for C4IT and Chief Information Officer, Rear Admiral Rusty Dash, explains why the Guard's doing it the way it's doing it.
Our starting point is what the Navy has done. Department of Navy CIO, Ms. Rathbun, has a very strong vision with PEO Digital and the work that is being done at NAVC with their digital engineering strategy. And so, but what is digital transformation? When we say that, it is two main things for us. One, it is building a digital thread of everything from requirements to how we develop to how we test and deliver, so that we're not doing things with pieces of paper or PDFs and static artifacts. We're building a model for everything we're doing. And again, starting with requirements and working all the way through. And then the second part is in delivery, in delivering the products and services, the capabilities to the Coast Guard, whether it's for mission support or for operational execution, in a way that is focused on the user and the operator, and really focusing on what they need as a modern technology that helps them do their job. So it's really two key outcomes for us, critically important for us in our interoperability with the Navy, and it's where industry is going, and the Navy in particular is going, and we're a fast follower to their leadership there.
How much of what you're doing is a model on what the Navy is doing, and how much of it is just adaptation? We're going to go a similar path, but maybe not exactly the.
Yeah, so we're figuring that out as we go right now, but they have a great starting point. And one of the other important things for us right now, with the commitment of this administration to invest in the Coast Guard, if we're going to modernize ships, aircraft, and C5I capabilities, and know that they're going to work together to make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. What this administration is demanding, and what we will deliver, is not just a new ship or a new helicopter or a new C5I system, but truly the capabilities together to produce outcomes for the American people. And so the only way we do that is if we really model the outcomes that we want to achieve, and then the systems we put together to do that. Very hard for us to do that the old school way, which is write a bunch of 5-page, 10-page, 100-page documents to talk about how things will work together without actually proving that they do. So the digital environment and that modeling allows us to know with high confidence how things are going to work together, or where the problems are going to exist that we're going to need to work through. And we care about that a lot inside the lifelines of the Coast Guard, but also knowing how important interoperability is. As an armed service member of the Joint Force, in particular interoperability with the Navy, we absolutely need to be step in step with them as they modernize as well. And so that's why we started off thinking that this was a nice to do thing, and what it really is a must do if we're going to move at speed with the efficiency that this administration is requiring of us, and know that we're going to produce the outcomes the Coast Guard needs.
Does that concept of interoperability, in particular with the Navy, but with other allies and partners, make your digital modernization effort easier? Does it make it harder? Is it neutral? Doesn't affect it much one way or the other?
So the outcome of interoperability without doing digital modernization would be very hard to do with any degree of confidence. Because we are doing this in a digital modernization way with model-based systems engineering and all of the digital transformation strategy techniques, we have a much higher level of confidence that we're going to achieve interoperability as we work a whole bunch of projects and acquisitions asynchronously. We know that as things come online, that they are going to work together, because we have built the models that tell us that, not pieces of paper that we've written in over the time that say, well, they should work together. We hope they do when it comes out at the end of the machine. No, we know it's going to work together because we've done all the modeling and we have that confidence that it's going to happen. So the interoperability is an outcome of the digital transformation, not a hopeful outcome that is achieved in the old way of doing acquisition.
Understood. This question may be more philosophical than tactical, but how is the Guard integrating the digital modernization efforts that you've been talking about into the acquisition process for some of the hardware that's coming online? I know you have a really big cutter program. The Polish security cutter program is in process, and a number of others.
Yeah, so we are phasing in aspects of digital engineering as those opportunities present themselves. We're certainly not going to stop any work in progress and take a knee and build a bunch of digital models. But at each one of those milestone events gives us an opportunity to introduce it. And it is one of those things that as we introduce it, then other programs can use it immediately and build on it. And so some of it will be very C5I focused, some of it will be ship focused, some of it will be aircraft focused. But the beauty is we don't have to start once and go all the way to the end. We can really work in parallel. And again, using the same standards and processes and copying a lot of the strategy that the Navy is using will allow us to be interoperable with the Navy by design from the very beginning.
Do you have milestones in this digital transformation effort that you want to try to hit in the next 6 months, year, 2 years, whatever?
So I think that I'm smiling right now because we're at a moment in the resource conversation of Congress and the administration are doing their jobs on that. And so we will be able to go faster with more resources. If we operate at the resources we have now, we'll be operating at a little slower pace. So our ability to move forward is really resource dependent. That said, in our organization, Admiral Chad Jacoby, head of Coast Guard acquisitions, he was actually designated in the Coast Guard Admiral assignment message last fall as the director of digital transformation for the Coast Guard. So everything that I'm saying is in line with Admiral Jacoby's vision. And so I have high confidence that we're going to be moving at speed. I don't have in my heart, I know where I want us to be. I just don't know if we can get there on a timeline without the resources.
Fair enough. Assuming that the resources come through, you will have the opportunity to move at much greater speed than you have in the past. How do you sync that to make sure that you don't, as we've seen in the past, not just in the Guard, but in other places, kind of get over your skis, that you stay on track and use those resources in the best possible way?
So I think this goes hand in hand with the work we want to do both within the Coast Guard and the Department of Homeland Security and the administration as a whole on the acquisition process. So this administration is leaning in on the FAR overhaul and the way that with an emphasis on speed. And so the only way we can go fast in acquisitions is if we get out of the 1980s way of managing that. And so we will do it incrementally. We'll move with confidence because we're following the Navy's model and the Navy's resources and how they do that through their NAVC and NAVWAR and NIWIC are really leaning in on that. And so I have confidence in our path forward. And so it's not like we're going our own in this endeavor. We're a fast follower behind the Navy and leaning in on that. And so the risk is very low for us, I think, in our digital modernization journey. The other real benefit that I haven't talked about yet is a focus on customer experience. And so as we pivot a little bit away from DoD interoperability, but more to the IT systems that we deliver, the Coast Guard issues documentation for U.S. vessels. So if you own, you're an American citizen or company and want to register your vessel, we issue that registration. or you're a U.S. Mariner and you want a mariner's license, say that credential, we do both of those things too. And so we really have customer-facing services. So when I say customer as the Coast Guard CIO, I'm thinking about the American maritime industry as much as I'm thinking about the average Coast Guardsman who is an employee of the Coast Guard and doing our mission. And getting back to customer experience, we owe the maritime industry world-class IT support. So when they need to register their vessel or accredit their mariner training or get a new license, that it is not the current system that we have today, which is unaccessible, but we're delivering world-class customer support to the America's maritime industry, because that's critically important to our nation as well. So it's external facing as well as internal facing in our digital modernization journey.
You can read more about the Coast Guard's digital modernization on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the evolution of the cloud coming to an agency near you. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment.
Innovation doesn't wait, and neither do we. At Maximus, we solve problems, streamlining operations, delivering solutions at speed and scale that drive measurable results. From strategy to execution, we simplify complexity, building trust through expertise and innovative technology. Every service, every time. Efficient government delivered. We don't follow innovation, we drive it. Maximus.
What we have been doing with DISA for the last decade, which is essentially a common contract vehicle that leverages the buying power of 1.6 million DoD users across civilian and active duty to streamline that process, have a centralized contract management organization, and that enables the DoD and the services to deploy those emerging technologies faster versus, month-long procurement processes that, legacy processes that we have today. So I think it's all aligned in terms of cost cutting, efficiencies, streamlining acquisition to get the best capability in the hands of the warfighters faster is at the tip of the spear really around what the DevSec priorities are for those.
Welcome back. The Defense Department will release the next generation of its JWCC cloud contract in the next several months. And DoD isn't the only agency that's reshaping its approach to cloud computing. Rich Crowe is president of civil sector at Booz Allen at DE25 recently. He tells me agencies may be heading to a new phase in the cloud.
They have a lot of their policies and their strategies in place and how they want to start moving forward with, many agencies are fairly far down the road with their cloud strategy. Others are kind of like at a midpoint in the journey, but we've definitely passed a tipping point where we're seeing, there's no turning back. You're going to see pretty much everyone's going to be in some form of a cloud. There'll be some on-prem sites left that'll be for various reasons. You'll probably have hybrid cloud operations, but we're moving, I would say, to the next phase where you're starting to see multi-cloud tenancy, and agencies are being more comfortable with deciding what's the right solution for the right mission, and we're starting to have a more sophisticated buy around the different cloud strategies, which is really, frankly, exciting.
What are the decision-making factors that agencies should consider when they're looking at multi-cloud environments?
Well, I think the first one is what's the mission? What problem are you trying to solve, right? That's always a key thing. That will lead you on a journey on what you're going to need in terms of security, resilience, latency, accessibility. And then you start looking at then if you need an edge solution coupled with a true cloud solution. So I think there's a lot of different things, but it always starts with the mission. If you don't have the mission central to what your strategy is, you might wind up going down a strategy that's going to be very difficult to then back into the mission at a later date.
You use the term edge solution, and it's striking to me that 5 years ago, halfway into the cloud journey, that discussion seemed to be limited exclusively to the Defense Department. And I think we'll hear today, every agency is thinking about cloud deployment from an edge perspective, at least partially. Is that a fair read on my part?
Yeah, I think it is. I think what we're finding is as we have more ubiquitous use of mobile solutions, that you need to have compute power where you need it, where the mission is being accomplished. So whether it's at the border, whether it's at a loading dock or at a port or a harbor or at a processing facility around the country, you need to have the compute power where you need it in a timely manner, and then have that integrated into your broader cloud strategy.
A term that you've used in the past when we have talked about cloud is scaled delivery. What's that term mean, and how does that fit into the way agencies should think about a multi-cloud environment?
Again, I think that's a great question. Again, when you think about scale delivery, the way at least I think about it is, you have some workloads that are fairly constant, well-defined. You have others that are burst loads. And so being able to ramp up and ramp down so that you can not only support the mission where you need it, but also do it in a cost-effective manner so that you're not having too much capacity when you don't necessarily need it for those quiet times, but also have the ability to scale up, to provide resiliency to the mission and the level of service, whether it's a citizen-facing application or an application that's supporting the business of government. I think those are really important factors in looking at scaling and scale to size.
Another element that I think we'll hear about today, referring to something that you mentioned earlier, is the fact that what makes the cloud ubiquitous for a lot of agencies is what they're doing in the cloud. A lot of these are mission-focused, can't fail applications and operations that they're undertaking in the cloud.
Sure. Well, again, if you start all your problem solving with the mission, what is it you're trying to achieve? You start to understand what are your risk tolerances for failure. And what you'll find in most government solutions, if not all, there's a very low risk tolerance, whether it's a citizen-facing application or it's a business of government application. You need to have resilience that, quite frankly, the private sector doesn't always necessarily need to have. And so I think when you're looking at that mission criticality is got to be paramount in your solution set when you're picking your cloud partner.
The resilience that the private sector doesn't need could potentially be roadblock, obstacle, maybe those aren't the right terms, but difficult for an agency to discern because the private sector doesn't necessarily need it. How does an agency determine that a particular solution is going to be 99 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 9s, whatever, reliable and resilient for them?
Well, I think again, when you think about the nature of the work, so if it's public safety, a good example is law enforcement. There's really no private analog for law enforcement, right? So if you're a law enforcement official and you need timely access to data, timely access to networks to enforce the law, to protect citizens, that is a no-fail mission. That cannot go down. So I think that's a good example where you need that resilience and that redundancy that the private sector doesn't necessarily need to achieve. If you're thinking about systems that are like air traffic control, things that, again, can't afford to go down, again, there's very little private sector analogs to that. And so I think there's definitely lessons learned from the private sector, but I think, frankly, the private sector can learn a lot from the government sector because they have to manage to a much higher standard.
You can read more and find a link to the entire TV show we created at DE25 on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, the new high risk list looks a lot like the old high risk list. Fed Gov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be right back. You can discover how artificial intelligence is reshaping government operations on AI and automation in depth. Kind of the latest evolution in that curve. Maybe there are still people who are still catching up as far as rank and file agency people who are being introduced to these tools from a task solution perspective. Is that a fair read on my part?
Absolutely. And sometimes with technology, the learning curve can be difficult. But I believe with AI, especially with the beauty of the tools that we're also providing is that they cater to different skills and different tasks and responsibilities and backgrounds, because you can have those low code or no code solutions that we provide, but also solutions that are code first, where you need to know some programming and languages. So again, I have to repeat here that the entry to the AI, the threshold has never been lower. And that is because there's so many tools right now that you can use to enhance what you're doing.
Welcome back. The Government Accountability Office's 2025 high risk list includes more than 30 problem areas all across government. Some of those areas sync with efforts of the Department of Government Efficiency. David Walker is former Comptroller General of the United States and leader of GAO. Dave, welcome. It's great to have you on the program. Where should people be looking for efficiency as DOGE is looking, within their own agencies or across the government as an enterprise?
Well, thank you, Francis, for the opportunity. GAO has been issuing the high risk list since the early 1990s. There are a number of items on there that have been on there since the beginning. So you can start at the high risk list, which is a good place to do, but you can also look at areas like duplication, overlap, redundancy in government, improper payments in government, a variety of things. I think it's important to understand what DOGE is and what it isn't. It's not doing an audit. It's basically doing tactical transactional reviews using all artificial intelligence to try to identify fraud, waste, abuse, or mismanagement. It's way overpromised. You know, if you ask Grok, which is the AI application of X, which Musk owns, rather than $160-something billion in savings, it's single digits in savings that's been verified. I'm sure they'll do better than that. But we're going to ultimately have to have much more dramatic transformation. You know, only Congress can cut spending. When you count tax preferences and direct spending, 85% of spending is on autopilot. We've written a blank check for it. So we're going to have a process that will be able to facilitate making tough choices on mandatory and discretionary spending and revenues. We're going to have to do both.
One of the current sitting chief financial officers at a cabinet level agency told me last week, the problem with what DOGE is attempting to do is that some member of Congress at some point in time proposed and then got into law every program that's in the federal government. And so it's going to require that level also of willingness to get rid of stuff. Is that a fair observation, do you think?
Well,
Dave?
Congress is part of the problem and Congress needs to be part of the solution. However, Congress is a lag indicator and Congress focuses on the next election, not the next generation. Let me tell you what we need. We need the type of commission that I talked about. It's a statutory commission that will engage the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, solicit input, set the table for a tough up or down vote in Congress that learns the lessons from Simpson Bowles. Simpson Bowles wasn't set up that way, wasn't set up for success. We need a constitutional amendment that will limit how much debt as a percentage of the economy we can take on. Only a constitutional amendment can bind current and future Congresses. Switzerland's done it, Sweden's done it, Germany's done it, other countries have done it. It's time that we do it. And that, you know, frankly, the U.S. government has been in existence since 1789. It still doesn't have a strategic plan government-wide, even though the law says it's supposed to have one. It doesn't have outcome-based indicators for economic, national security, domestic, and other issues. And so therefore, what does it do? It just throws money at things, whether they're working or they're not working. So we need a fundamental strategic and transformational review of what is it doing, how is it doing, who's doing it, how do we measure success. I'm working on all of those things right now from different points on the battlefield with different hats on. As you can see, I've changed hats a few times. You have too, obviously.
Yeah, I have the same issue. I have the same issue you do with that, Dave. How does what can one do either within an agency, though, to advance the principles, at least, of what you just described?
Well, I think you have to look at some of the things we talked about. You know, the high risk list, duplication, overlap, redundancy, improper payments. You know, frankly, in the federal government, what I find is there's a lot of good people in very bad systems. Okay, I think DOGE found out that, you know, a lot of the major systems in the federal government use COBOL. They probably didn't even know what COBOL was, right? And so as a result, you get these things that come out that say, well, we're paying people that are 150, 170 years old Social Security benefits. No, we're not, okay? And, you know, they're not touching the design of the social insurance programs. But the truth is there is a lot of fraud. There is a lot of waste. There is a lot of abuse in healthcare programs. That's where the money is. And so ultimately you're going to have to go over that, go towards those programs at some point.
It's interesting that you make that point, Dave, because almost every conversation that I have on or off camera with somebody from your former agency, GAO, I almost always ask them the question about some form of data. Do you say that, do you make that recommendation because you know something happened, or because you don't know what happened because you don't have the information because the agency was not able to provide it? And more often than not, it's the latter rather than the former. The agency just can't say whether it does a certain thing or doesn't do a certain thing.
The federal government has thousands of legacy, non-integrated information systems that don't talk to each other. That is a big part of the problem. But before you modernize your information systems, you have to rationalize your processes. You don't want to take the current processes and automate them, because that's a big part of the problem that we have right now. I mean, I myself have been subject to tax, somebody taking my tax refund, and the IRS never should allow that to happen based upon the individual facts and circumstances. I brought it to the attention of the Commissioner of IRS. I brought it to my successor, Gene Dodaro, who used to be my number 2 when I was Comptroller General, because I wasn't just concerned about me, I was concerned about other people. I have the ability to pick up the phone and get people, but most people don't have that. And so I think it's important that we recognize, we've got to modernize our systems and our management practices. We are not employing 21st century systems and management practices. And for an entity as important and as sizable as the federal government, that's totally unacceptable.
Final thought, Dave, regarding the management practices, what are the metrics that you would like to see agencies use to determine whether the management practices that they put into place are giving them the results that they want?
Well, the kind of metrics I'm talking about are metrics with regard to how's the economy doing, how are we doing with regard to our foreign relations, how are we doing with regard to our national security, how are we doing with regard to a range of domestic issues, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's immigration, whatever. In order to know how well you're doing, you have to have outcome-based indicators. Are you making progress? Or, how do you compare to your competitor groups? When you do that, you get a very different picture. For example, we spend more than any other country on earth as a percentage of our economy on healthcare. We spend more than anybody else on education. We have below average results. The answer is not to throw more money at those systems, it's to fundamentally re-engineer those systems based on 3 principles. Do you have properly designed incentives? Do you have adequate transparency? And do you have appropriate accountability? In many cases, for the U.S., we're 0 for 3. That's called a strikeout. No wonder it's not working. So we have to get back to basics, and I'm hoping we do before too long.
Dave, it's always great to have you on the program. Thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you, Francis. Thank you.
You can read more at fedgovtoday.com on today's show page. Fed Gov Today continues in just a moment. What is the most important thing that you think people like Austin will see moving forward that they should prepare for today?
The appetite for more agentic AI, for more generative AI use cases. There's a lot of appetite to move into that space, and we don't want to inhibit innovation, and we don't want to inhibit progress. And at the same time, there's going to be a tremendous amount of rework if you do not have your semantic layer pulled together first.
Fed Gov Today TV is back next Sunday morning at 10:30. Linnea Jones, the CIO of the CIA, is here. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Have a great week.